Bienvenidos a otro capítulo de Échale Podcast. Mi nombre es José Quintero y el día de hoy, espero que les guste mucho este capítulo porque hoy traje a uno de mis mejores amigos para poder platicar sobre distintas cosas que han pasado en su vida, lo que lo ha llevado a convertirse en un empresario, a abrir su propio negocio, y creo que es muy importante. Ya lo he tenido antes en el podcast, creo que esta va a ser la primera vez que lo tengo hablando completamente, bueno, no completamente, pero sí un poquito de Spanglish, pero sin más preámbulos, con ustedes, The Therapist Homie, Emmanuel Garcia. ¿Cómo estás?
Muchas gracias, amigo. ¿Ando bien?
Es muy interesante poder tener una plática contigo en español porque obviamente te conozco por más de 10 años y todo lo hemos hablado en inglés. ¿Este es un reto para ti?
Lo vamos a hacer en Spanglish. Mi español todavía ando aprendiendo un poco más cómo hablar en español.
Ajá.
Pero te voy a decir un poco en inglés, un poco en español y ojalá eso esté bien contigo.
No, sí, está perfecto. O sea, y siéntete cómodo. Al final de cuentas, tú y yo nos conocemos hace varios años y creo que es muy importante porque lo que tú haces para tu trabajo es ayudas a la gente, y creo que es muy importante saber que estos recursos también están disponibles para la comunidad latina. Y no hay muchos hombres, si me atrevo a decir, que estén haciendo el trabajo que tú estás haciendo. Pero cuéntanos un poquito de lo que haces. Uh-huh.
So I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I am with the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and what I do is mental health therapy. So I focus on working with individuals and families, and specifically with adolescents from 12 to 17, and then adults 18 to 40 or 45 years of age.
Okay, entonces trabajas con adolescentes, trabajas en este ámbito de la salud mental y evidentemente también con personas que han tenido adicción hacia la sustancia. ¿Qué te llegó, o qué te llevó más bien, a escoger esta carrera o este ángulo?
A couple of factors play into that. So growing up, I didn't have much education within like the Latino community or even in my neighborhood or not even in my school. I really was spoken about mental health or being able to receive that type of care. And so throughout my college experience and even graduate experience, I came to learn that that was a resource for people. And so what happened was that it led me to seek my own support with my own mental health. And then two, I came to learn a little bit more that there needs to be more education within the Latino community. So that's pretty much what drove me into the field. And with that, right, like I came to also find out that there's not that many men in the profession itself. And so that's another thing that kind of just keeps me going and keeps my drive with being a therapist today.
Pero, o sea, entiendo que pues no haya muchos hombres en esto de la salud mental y especialmente siendo terapeutas, y enfocándose en la adicción. ¿Por qué específicamente en la adicción? Muchas personas dirían, oye, pues yo voy a aconsejar a personas que a lo mejor tienen problemas en su vida, en su día con día, que también lo haces, porque hemos tenido tú pláticas, aunque eres mi amigo, no me puedes dar como que terapia, porque eso sería un conflicto de interés. Sin embargo, das muy buenos consejos, los das desde una perspectiva de un terapeuta, pero también me interesa mucho ese lado, ¿por qué te enfocaste en la adicción?
Sí. So my own personal experiences, I myself am in recovery, so I'm sober. I'm approaching 3 years of my sobriety, and I struggled a lot with alcohol specifically. That was my drug of choice when I was going through my own challenges personally. And so, you know, with alcohol being like the main problem for me in the Latino community and in the culture itself, like alcohol is always around you. It's pretty normalized to one, throw a party, have a quinceañera, have a bola, and then there's just like your uncles, your tios, family, right? Like just binge drinking, like drinking till like the sun comes up sometimes. And so like that's not a healthy way to really have a relationship with alcohol. And so I came to just struggle with that, and it led me to down my own recovery journey. And that's why I focus on that in my own work as a therapist. And it also comes natural to me. I really understand like what it's like struggling with your mental health and substance use at the same time. So that's also what kind of gives me more personal experience that makes my work with like the clients or the families that I work with feel much more natural, feels more authentic.
Sí, no, y esto se me hace muy interesante porque como a veces uno no ve las se puede decir las bendiciones que pasan en tu vida,
Ujú.
porque yo me acuerdo en la universidad, o sea, creo que todos los que pasamos por la universidad aquí, en nuestro entorno, más que nada ahí en San Bernardino, tuvimos un problema con el alcohol, porque tomábamos, creo que excesivamente, pero porque no sabíamos controlar nuestros límites, no sabíamos y no teníamos esa inteligencia emocional todavía. Y me acuerdo que hubo muchos instantes donde obviamente uno como latino, y no hay por qué negarlo, empieza a tomar a una edad que no debería de. Yo empecé a los 15 años, pero tampoco estoy diciendo que empecé a tomar y me empecé a emborrachar. La
Ujú.
diferencia, yo creo, y no sé si tú tendrás otra experiencia distinta. Yo cuando iba a México sí probaba el alcohol, pero
Ujú.
siempre era el alcohol mezclado con agua mineral. Y
Ujú.
entonces no te pegaba mucho la resaca, o sea, no tenías el famoso hangover. Ya
Yeah.
cuando uno va a la universidad, no sabes cómo preparan las bebidas en México y en Estados Unidos, y especialmente en la universidad, te la estás tomando
Ujú.
y a ver cómo caes. Y eso puede llevarte a tener patrones que no son muy buenos en tu vida. ¿Qué patrones tuviste
Ujú.
que tú te empezaste a dar cuenta,
Ujú.
esto no es para mí?
Sí. Mis relaciones que tuve con mi familia y con mis amigos,
Ujú.
I came to learn that, they started to be impacted,
Sí,
and not in the positive way, right?
sí,
Like, there was an instance where I would come home and I would be very hungover, or I would just bring up so much worry for like my family members that didn't really receive like a update or
sí,
notification of like where I was or my whereabouts from the day before. And so like that, it was very painful for me to just watch like my mother and my grandma and just like my family members see that I was struggling,
sí,
but yet I still did not communicate that with them. And then also just like while I was in the in the party scene, right?
ujú,
Like, there was instances where you were there by my side, and we had some troubles or challenges with other people around us just for
drinking.
drinking, right?
Ujú,
And so with like ignorance that comes with when you're drunk too, right? Like you're not really self-aware, you're not conscious of what your behaviors are doing.
sí,
And so like all of that, it led to just impacting my relationships, it led to getting in trouble with the law,
ujú,
it led to more hopelessness and feeling more essentially emotional pain.
ujú,
And that really led to struggling with my mental health a little bit more. And so
ujú,
those three instances really made me like take a step back and be like, okay, alcohol is not for me. This relationship is not healthy. Like I
ujú,
need to stop what I'm doing and I need to go sober now.
sí.
And I really want to do it to just better my own self as a person, better my relationships, better my mental health, and stay in alignment with my purpose.
Yeah.
I really started my career as a therapist, and I was doing this because I love what I do and I believe in what I do. And if I was going to continue to drink, it was going to just steer me off the wrong path and
Sí.
steer me off the path of what I want to do today.
Sí, es muy importante como que recalcar que el alcohol puede llevarte a hacer cosas que a lo mejor tú en tu entorno no quieres hacer, pero sí me acuerdo de varios momentos donde estábamos en la universidad y empezabas a tomar y desafortunadamente pues nos afectaba a todos en nuestro alrededor, y a veces uno sí tomaba por convivir, pero llegábamos a un punto
Mm-hmm.
que incluso mi mamá me lo dijo, tú ya no estás tomando por
Mm-hmm.
pasártela bien, tú estás tomando para empedarte.
Yeah.
Y también varias ocasiones que nos fuimos a tu casa y tu mamá, y siempre me va a acordar un abrazo muy fuerte para tu mamá, pero me dijo, oye, vienen pedos, y yo, no, pero se nos olía el alcohol por
Yeah.
nuestras venas y que me da un sope, porque pues yo acá queriendo taparte, y aunque sí veníamos tomados,
Mm-hmm.
causó una mala relación entre nosotros,
Mm-hmm.
entre nuestros amigos, y sí empiezas a sentirte un poco solo. Por eso creo que es muy importante que tú como hombre o tú como mamá o papá en familia empieces a identificar, si es que tienes a tus hijos, qué cambios están teniendo. A lo mejor no son cambios que sean normales, pero son cambios que el alcohol o una sustancia los está llevando a crear estos cambios.
Mm-hmm.
Porque sí fueron momentos diferentes, se podría decir. Pero ¿tú anhelabas platicar con alguien o por qué no lo hacías?
Desde chico, yo siempre no platicaba mucho. I was very timid. I was shy. I was always like to myself. Siempre me miraban como el niño callado, el niño que no hace nada. Es muy inocente. And so, you know, the more and more like I would hear that about like who I was as a kid, like I just came to believe that that's just who I was. Like that's
They projected that on you?
not really projected, but they just made me believe that about myself. Like I'm the quiet kid, I'm the innocent kid, and so like I continued to believe that, and as I believed that, like I never really had anyone ask me about me. Like I was always kind of like in the shadows per se, right? And so with being in the shadows, like it made it more difficult for me to come out of the shadows and to like seek help or have a conversation about like what I was going through. So I felt like I needed someone to like be a helping hand or like open that path for me, like someone to just simply be like, hey, like how are you doing, let me check in with you, like how what's on your mind, right? Like how are you managing dealing with school and with this and etc. And so like I feel like that would have made a huge difference in me being able to just communicate a little bit more with what I was actually going through internally. And so later on, you know, you being my best friend, right, and in college, like you were able to create that path for me. You were able to create that path for me because you were very like outgoing, outspoken, very emotionally like open as a person, and I really appreciated that. And I was more to like to myself. I would internalize my feelings. I would put up a stone wall. I would pretty much have like, you would interact with me and I would be very mindful with how much I'm sharing with you. And you were able to break that down due to just who you are as a person. a chismoso, but you also cared, and that made a huge difference. And like, you know, I was able to express a little bit more with you, and you know, within my own friend group, like growing up, like we would, you know, we were all like boys, we were homies, we were just chilling, right? And we never really talked about our emotions or like what we were struggling with. It was always just kind of like other topics we would talk about. And so like into college, when I joined the Brotherhood and when I, you know, had my relationship with you start up, like that really created a new way of me being able to be vulnerable. And so that I appreciated that. But growing up, my point here is that I didn't really have much access to like that vulnerability, and I didn't have much conversations that would spark an emotional like response from my own self. In turn, I was always that for other people. Like for my friends, even for my siblings, like I always was that person that they would come to like seek out advice or to simply be a listening ear, right? Or like if they were going through something very painful, like they would come to me and just vent. And it just was in like my presence, I guess my calmness, or even just like my attentiveness to like what they were saying.
In retrospect, sorry to interrupt, is that a lot to put on someone?
It is, you know, and it is a lot because it also made me feel like I care so much for others, and it feels like I'm not being cared for myself. And so like it, not to put it in a way of like they're not reciprocating that energy, because I did care and I still care for a lot of like friends and family members, and I will always be here with an open ear. But it also would have been nice for me to receive that type of care. And it felt like at that time, like I showed up in that way, just being very empathetic and essentially like wanting to be there for them as like what I want other people to be there for me, right? So I really made an extra effort to like be that for other people, and it just came naturally too. Like people would just come seek me out.
Dijiste que cuando estabas creciendo muchas personas te decían que eras, bueno, tus papás, familiares, eras tímido, eras el callado, entonces tú mismo te empezaste a, no quiero decir creer, porque creo que a lo mejor internamente sí eres un poco más reservado, más callado, entonces ya, pero te fueron identificando. ¿Cuándo fue ese momento donde tú decidiste, no voy a ser el callado, voy a ser el rebelde, voy a ser el que voy a probar sustancias, voy a ser el chistoso? ¿Hubo un momento, a qué edad? ¿Y algo específico que quisiste tú cambiar?
En colegio, cuando terminé la preparatoria, yo miré que mi privilegio de tener papeles porque mi familia en ese tiempo no tenía papeles y tengo mis mis hermanas y mi hermano y mis papás que vinieron de aquí de México y yo first generation fui el primer que nací aquí en Estados Unidos. And so when I graduated high school, I had an opportunity to go to college. And when I, kind of realized that I had that opportunity and realized that my family members didn't have that opportunity, like that sparked something in me. Like that really drove me to like, I'm going to change here. I'm going to make things different. I'm going to go ahead and get involved on campus. I'm going to go ahead and step outside of my comfort zone and do things that I don't normally feel comfortable with doing. And so like in college, I found myself joining a fraternity. I found myself working on campus. I found myself studying abroad, teaching English abroad, like doing all of these experiences to really step myself out of my comfort zone because I did not want to continue to feel and then live the way I was living with this narrative of like being that quiet kid or like, being the shy one or like not really being an outspoken person. Like all of that really helped me feel more confident in just showing up in the way that I am today, right? And so like all of that moment from high school to college was like that pivotal moment that made me realize like I need to change. I need to do something different. And I will do something different. And so I did.
At what age did you try your first substance? Would it be alcohol, Mary Jane, marijuana? ¿A qué edad probaste tú la sustancia?
At 14. And at that time, I was late in the game. I was late in the game.
Yo no hasta creo que en la universidad. Por nomás curiosidad, pero a mí no me gustó.
Yeah, a los 14 años, I was a freshman in high school. And throughout middle school, I had, todos mis amigos from my street, shout out to my friends in Rialto and my street and where I was where I was raised. And also just at that time when I went to high school for middle school, I was known as a straight edge, and that's what you refer to like someone who's sober, doesn't do substances. And it really came to having that peer pressure of like, let me just go ahead and try it.
Which is interesting because at 14, 15 is the age now that you mentor therapy these kids, right, that are dealing with substance abuse. What would you tell your parents back in the day if you could go back in time and be like, look out for these signs? So to all the parents who are probably listening to this podcast, what are some of these signs that could potentially be red flags that maybe should spark a conversation with your kid?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a variety of different red flags to look out for. One of them just being like simple social withdrawal, even if that's from family members. If you notice your kid and or a little primo or someone in the family just withdraw themselves or isolate themselves a little bit from like family gatherings, from social settings, like that's a red flag, or that's a warning sign. I don't really want to say red flag, it's a warning sign. And then there's other warning signs too, such as low performance in school, right? Getting in trouble in school, any instances with like running away from home or getting into fights, and or what's another one that comes to mind? On their body, right? If you suspect any like any unfamiliar like cuts or unfamiliar wounds that might have not been there previously, like that's another warning sign, right? Because there's also other behaviors that teenagers engage in to cope, and they're not healthy coping skills. That's what you call like a maladaptive coping skill, or just maladaptive behavior, not a coping skill. I scratch that. But it's a maladaptive behavior, which can look like, substance abuse. It can look like self-harming. It can look like binge eating. It can look like restricting your foods. So all of those warning signs are important to just look out for, to just kind of look a little bit more into like the root cause, or may bring up a opportunity to seek some support from a mental health professional. So that way the parents get the support that they need to.
As Latinos, sometimes we look towards teachers as a guide. and to parent our kids. Obviously, like, hey, I don't know what's going on with my kid. How can I help them out? Why do you think so many parents, and especially Latino parents, are so detached from their kids' emotions to a certain extent? Like, I'm not trying to say that our parents didn't love us, but they weren't as present emotionally in order to talk to us about being emotionally intelligent, speaking about our emotions.
Well, I also want to talk about the immigrant experience, right? Because our parents came to, I'll speak for my parents, and my parents came from Mexico and were, put in a position to create their foundation here in the United States. And so that required for them to sacrifice a lot of hours to work and to make ends meet and to really build a future for their children. And so at times, like, when a parent is going through so much responsibilities, that takes away from their attentiveness to their children, and it also leads to like their own burnout, right, and their own challenges as parents, and having to navigate responsibilities, having to navigate learning a different language, having to navigate just different settings and in the workspace itself, right? And at that same time, like, most of my parents, their highest level of education was like the 6th grade.
Same as my parents.
Like the 6th grade, right? And so there's also a lack of education that comes with that. And our Latino parents or Hispanic parents, like, they don't always get the opportunity to learn these types of resources or learn different parenting styles. Like, they're going based off what they know or what their parents taught them.
And I mean, in retrospect, I'd like to think about like my mom becoming a parent at 21. Right now I'm at 33. Let's say if I had a child at 21, my child would probably be going into their developmental. Right? I'm losing my English just because,
that's how I feel, but in Spanish.
I feel like I don't practice my English enough, so I'm going to just continue the rest of this podcast in English. But they're developing, right? They're in their developing years. And sometimes, if I put it into perspective, my child would probably be 12 right now. I still feel like I have so much emotional intelligence to grow and to learn. And if I would have had a child, obviously I would have never learned any of that. So maybe I'd be having almost like a cyclical version of my life, but in my child. So it's sort of like, I don't want to talk about that because I don't know how to talk about it.
Right.
I'd rather have the teacher talk about it. I'd rather have like a therapist. But obviously mental health is becoming more aware. Where was this moment of, I want to help others? When did that moment come? Because at the end of the day, you chose a profession that's of service.
I will answer that question, but as you were just expressing about, like, being your age and your mom and her age and, how old she was when she had children, right? Still within the Latino community to this day, as much progression has happened with mental health, like, the topic itself is still very much taboo. And, there's still so much stereotype that comes with mental health. And within the Latino community, like, oftentimes you hear some, like, people say, like, no, esos son para los locos, or like, no, yo no estoy enfermo, yo no voy a ir a hacer esas cosas. Like, whatever that may be, there's still very much a taboo feel to, like, speaking about mental health, speaking about your emotions, being a man and speaking about your emotions, right? Like, there's so much that we can get into with that too. Sorry, I just had that thought, and I wanted to express that. But going back to your question, what led me to be of service to other people, towards the end of my college experience, I became an advisor with middle school students, which was actually an opportunity that you provided to me. Thank you again. And at that time, I had came back from my travels abroad, and my travels abroad really sparked much more of a empathetic presence for me. It allowed me to be more open to receiving support and care from other people, because throughout my travels, there were certain instances where I did need support, and there was complete strangers that offered that support, and I came to see, like, the compassion and their kindness and from the world, right? And that really, like, it really touched me right here, right? Like, my heart, and that opened up myself to just continue to be that compassionate and caring empathetic person for other people. And so when I came back from my travels and I started this advising role with these middle school kids, I started to remind myself of, wow, when I was this age, I was going through A, B, and C, and now I'm on the other side, and I can be for them what I needed when I was their age.
Do you want to know something funny? These kids are now graduating college.
I know, that's very mind-blowing to me.
I know. So shout out to Arroyo Valley Middle School and to San Bernardino High School, because that's where most of these kids were that I think we're talking about. But I'm pretty sure one or two of them are listening to this and maybe remember Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia.
I don't know what they called you, but you were what, 20 years old? You were a kid.
I was 21,
yeah. Yeah, you were a kid.
I was a kid.
Yeah. So it's so interesting to see that growth, because I remember when you came to college, and to anybody listening to this, I don't want to scare you into like, what is my child going to do in college? Because I think this is a natural thing for humans to experience a little bit of independence. And I think, and I see it sometimes with my brothers, it's hard for parents to let go of their child and let them become an adult. And with my brothers, even though they've never moved out, they've matured, but they haven't matured at a faster rate than most kids who move out. And to anybody who's seeing this, if you've moved out of your parents' house, you know what I'm talking about, because there is a definite like difference within even that first week. You're just like, well, you have to learn how to cook for yourself, you have to learn how to wash for yourself, you have to learn how to connect your bills, and pay rent. And you're just like, wow, this is different. I'm so used to having like mom or dad. So I don't want to scare people into college, but so many people also doubted you going into college. And I'm gonna go ahead, your fraternity name, because we give each other fraternity names, is subestimado, which is underestimated. So many people underestimated you even making it through college. Why was that? Is it because also of your shyness?
Well, that's another part of my story and what drives me today. And it wasn't just my shyness. Throughout high school, when you asked me earlier about like at what age did I started doing drugs or drinking alcohol, and that was my freshman year, and there was a shift there in terms of like how I showed up with my presence, with what I would do on the weekends, with like going to parties, right? And so
in high school,
my
parents didn't, like, well, my mom.
These house parties, flyer parties back in the day, like anyways, there was a time where there would be adults or even like teachers in high school that would see me in the way that I dress and the way that I presented myself to the world, and they would automatically, paint this picture or assumption that I'm not going to be much for myself, and I'm going to just continue to do what they see out on the streets with people getting in fights, or people dropping out of high school, or people going to continuation school and not continuing off to college.
Like a bum, basically.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say bum either, because...
I mean, it has a negative connotation, but...
There is a negative... It's just like a stereotype there,
But these teachers are seeing you like, oh, wow, you're not going to amount to nothing. You're going to stay and work a 9 to 5, and you're never going to better yourself. Right.
And what I want to say there, right, like, what happens when teachers or adults show up in that way to a teenager, they disempower them, right? And when they disempower them, they start to believe that in themselves, and then that also makes it more difficult for them to really try to be successful. And for me, in turn, it did disempower me, and also it gave me more like fuel. It was like, no, like they're gonna go ahead and think that about me, and I'm gonna prove them differently. And at the end of the day, like, throughout that experience, it was at that time like me trying to really prove myself to them. But then throughout my own personal journey, I came to learn like, no, this is just more for myself and what I can do for others.
Were there moments during your like high school years where you probably felt defeated and you said, wow, they are right?
Yes, there was times when, that did happen.
How did you build that grit in order to continue? Because there's probably parents watching this, or maybe their kids are watching this, or who knows, maybe years down the line who's watching these videos, and they might be like, wow, how did Emmanuel empower himself? How do I empower myself when I feel hopeless, when everybody else is thinking I'm going to amount to nothing?
Yeah. So with that, like community is still very important. And, growing up in a Latino household, it was very powerful when, although there wasn't much like emotional processing or emotional conversation happening, there was always an essence of motivation happening from like parents or just adults in the Latino community, such as like si se puede, or like keep moving forward, or like you got this, like, we are able to get this done. And all of that like instilled that message and gave me that grit to keep moving forward. It just helped me like take a step back and reflect that like if my parents were able to come to this country and go through all these obstacles and cross the border on foot and like sacrifice like so much in order for them to create a better future for ourselves, like that gave me so much power. Like that gave me so much grit. It gave me strength. It gave me like that push to keep moving forward and not to give up. And with that, like that was like the root for me, but also like my friends, like we would hype each other up like that. Like, no, you gotta keep pushing, bro. Like, keep going up. Yeah.
Like, was this in high school?
Yeah, this was in high school, and in college it became even stronger, right? Like, with the brotherhood, like that was having you and having other brothers that like, we started having more vulnerable conversations on, or we just started to provide opportunities to like empower them and motivate them to like grow and develop. Like all of that gave more grit, more fuel, more teaching of like,
because then you had, like you said, a community backing you up, knowing like, hey, they believe in me. Maybe those teachers didn't believe in me, but like at least I'm having one person. That one person became two, and then so many people started seeing like, wow, that person is doing things. So then more people start kind of like just in the sidelines supporting you, but also watching you. And you start becoming an example, and I think it's a beautiful thing that we get to experience and we got to experience in college. You get to college and obviously you're looking to fit in and socialize, go above and beyond. When did you start noticing a bad relationship with alcohol or substances?
There was signs in college that I ignored, that I avoided, that I knew was not okay. There was instances in college where I would black out and I would do a behavior that's out of alignment with my character, and then the next day you just wake up with regrets or a lot of like guilt or just a lot of like sadness with how you showed up or handled yourself the night before. And all of that was pretty heavy. And what would happen is I would deal with it like in a way where I would just keep it to myself and not talk about it. And then I would pick back up and drink again. So I ignored it. Like I knew it was there. I knew that what I was doing was not right, and I really ignored it, avoided it, and I never sought out the support until towards my last semester of going to college was when I received a DUI. The last semester of graduating from college, was when I received a DUI.
At that point, you were studying sociology. You wanted already to go into service, into being a counselor?
Yes.
You had already decided that?
Yeah, I had already decided that. No, not yet, actually. No. My last semester, I was figuring out what I was going to do next, like post-grad. And with that last semester, I was trying to figure things out. And so I got this DUI, and this happened in November. And I kid you not, from November to I want to say the end of January, I really went through like a state of sadness. Like I withdrew, like I stayed inside of my room for like a good 3 to 4 weeks, like after graduation. Like I graduated in December, like the beginning of December.
When was your DUI?
Like the last week of November. And so it was like 2 weeks before my graduation. So that's when it started to like creep in, like, wow, like I'm really, it almost like I was detached from my experience, because I had gotten in trouble with the law, and I was graduating from college, and I was just questioning everything about like what I had came to college for, what I was trying to do for myself, what I wanted to prove. Like, I went through a spiral, and that spiral led me to just isolate for like 3 weeks in my bedroom.
That's when, can you explain to us what happened? Where were you caught? Was anybody hurt?
No one was hurt. I don't really want to get into the specifics of that right now. And thankfully, it didn't lead to me, myself being injured, or just putting other people in danger, which, you know, things when you're driving under the influence can easily go in that direction. Yeah. And so for me, I'm grateful that that did not happen. And so as I was easing out of this 3-week period of like being in the gutter, essentially, as I being in this like deep hole, I started to that's when I like told myself I need to stop drinking. I need to prioritize my health. I got into working out. That was the first time I ever started working out. I remember in college, you would always try to take me to the gym. And remember how I never wanted to go to the gym? I was like, I never wanted to go to the gym. This was the first time I actually committed myself to going to the gym, working out, you know, being more active. And
I felt guilty for not being there when you got your DUI, because I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I was always, for the most part, partying with you and drinking with you. I wouldn't get as drunk, but I would still drive home. So I always felt like, man, like, it's so unfortunate that one party that I didn't go to, like, he gets a DUI. So I was just like, if only, you know, we always start questioning, if only I had done this, if only you know, but I mean, things happen for a reason. You started working out. You felt that transition?
Yeah, I felt that transition. And that's when with that transition, I reflected so much. And then I applied to my master's program. That gave me a drive of like, okay, it's not over. And at that time, I also pushed myself to talk to my dad. I expressed to my dad, like, hey, like, this is what happened.
I think I was there.
I don't think you were there I don't think you were there for this one, because this
well, there was an instance where I think we went to a party and I was like, okay, this is the moment he's talking to his parents. All right, I'm just gonna sit on the sidelines.
Oh, that's that goes a little bit later, right? But no, this happened in my room as I was going through this period. I really spoke to my dad, and I told him like, hey, like, this is what happened. This is where I'm at. Yeah, you know, I really pushed myself, you know, like, with all the reflection that happened in my college experience, like, I really pushed myself. And my dad was very supportive. You know, my dad was there, and, you know, I love my dad. Like, my dad, he himself is a very kind and, you know, attentive person, and he's supportive. But also he has that wall, right? Like, he has that stone wall, just like I did.
Did you know he was supportive? Or did you realize how supportive and kind he was after you had the conversation?
I always realized that he was supportive.
But this was just validation.
This was just validation, and also, how would I say this?
Reassuring. And I'm just saying because you took the opportunity and you had the valiancy, I don't know how to say it, like la valentía, to go and talk to your dad. So many young men don't have that, you know, innate feeling to go to talk to their father figures, because they feel like they're going to be judged, like, oh, how is a man going to talk about their feelings? But you had obviously the idea that your dad was kind, caring, loving father, but because you took that opportunity, that risk, you realize that's who my dad is, and it's such a great feeling to know that.
Yeah, it is it's a powerful feeling to feel with your father. And with my dad, you know, as I was reflecting right now, I growing up, my dad was always working, so was my mom. And, there comes a time where they're distant, and at times I felt like my connection with them wasn't really a connection. And then it also came for me, like, I don't want to be a burden to them or worry them more when they're already dealing with so much. And so growing up with that first generation experience, like, that's pretty common with first generation students or just people that, have parents that need to do additional things to support the family. And so for me, it felt like I just didn't want to be a burden to my dad. My dad was also very distant, or like very focused on doing other things for the family. And again, our household was not like emotionally expressive. There wasn't much talk of like, I love you, or, there wasn't much crying happening unless there was like a huge event that would occur. Yeah, right. And so at that time, going back to like me expressing that to my dad, I pushed myself to go against all those feelings that I was dealing with previously. And that really helped me just move forward and move along. And he had dealt with similar experience with my older brother, which also added to like me not wanting to be a burden or me not wanting to worry them. My older brother went through a similar experience.
Oh.
The lights went off.
Let's see. How do I turn on? We're going to take a quick break. All right, we're back. Ya se prendieron las luces. ¿Qué ha pasado? No sé, pero estamos platicando con Emmanuel Garcia, also known as the therapist homie on social media. He started his own private practice working with teens with substance abuse, but he also works with adults and family members. We were talking about your father and the connection that you've had and the importance it was for you to share as a family. Is the dynamic within the family, has it now changed? Can you guys cry now? Can you guys talk about I love you as a family?
There's a lot of progress that has been made for sure. And we can communicate that more and actually have more conversations like amongst our siblings and amongst our parents and really talk about, what's happening with each individual person. And it's funny that you asked that because it's just every single time like my fiance and I go and visit my parents, like my fiance always tells me like it just turns into like a process group, like you guys are always processing something. And
like a therapy session.
Yes. And so like it's like an intervention happening. And
it's like, oh, Emmanuel's here, great, let's all look at Lalo.
No, and it's not even because I'm a therapist now. I do appreciate my older siblings and my brother that also has been a huge change in our family dynamics that is able to describe the experience of, the Mexican household and describe the experience of growing up in the United States, right? And so having him be there with much more hablando en español, like having that language, right? That sometimes I don't have it. Sometimes I don't have. He is able to easily do it, and so like I appreciate that about him. And then even with me and just like my knowledge now and just how much I've changed within my family,
they always say it only takes one person to change the route trajectory or the family dynamics, and I think you were that person, because if you think about it, with your immediate family, that conversation is now being shifted. Now with your siblings with their kids, your sobrinos, that conversation is changing, and I can only imagine how it's also changing around the block in Rialto. The toe, all these kids who you grew up with, who probably had very similar experiences to the therapist homie, are probably like, wow, one of our own from the block is talking about these things. Now you want to be that for somebody else. You started working and I'm gonna fast forward, with troubled youth in extreme cases. How was that experience? Because as soon as you graduated from your counseling program, you also had to, in order to be a LPCC,
there you go, you got it,
licensed professional clinical counselor. Was that clinical counselor? I don't even know what that means, if I'm being completely honest, but it's something with clinical. So it sounds like some doctor.
Well, it's very much in the health profession, right? It's mental health specifically, and it really tailors a little bit more to like mental health diagnosis. And so in the profession, there is a diagnostic manual that we go based off of to support us in diagnosing people and really evaluate their symptoms and just, you know, how long they've been dealing with them. And so that essentially is really what helps us, the providers, provide a treatment plan and provide the care that will benefit them to support them in decreasing those symptoms or essentially healing through their obstacles. And it also helps with collaboration with nurse practitioners or psychiatrists or psychologists.
So, I mean, like, I'm just going to go ahead and think about it. Like, for anybody watching at home, if you probably have your kid in high school, in college even, what would be the process for them to go to someone like you? Do they first have to see a counselor and then the counselor makes that diagnosis? Or can they even diagnose, or they suggest me like, it's out of my scope, maybe see a therapist?
Yeah.
But what would be the difference between a therapist, like, I don't know, versus an LPCC?
Yeah, well, there is different branches within the therapy world. For a school counselor, it is out of their scope to diagnose and to provide mental health like interventions in depth. They are able to refer out, and so they can connect the students to outside providers or outside treatment centers to support them with that process. But there's different avenues that a family or individuals can go and seek out support. There's, of course, you can go through your own insurance company that they provide a list of providers that are within your area and or can provide the support that you're looking for. Another avenue too, nowadays, as you can see, there's plenty of platforms that you can go on there through an app or through their website, and you just go ahead and put your preferences and put some of the challenges that you may be facing or what you want therapy to support you with. And that is also another avenue that
that's some work though, because in order for you to know what services you need, you have to really know what you're looking for, right? Because I can say like, I don't know, I just want to talk to somebody because I feel sad, but maybe I need like a substance abuse counselor. Like, that must be so hard for somebody to even identify.
Yeah. For a person, yes, I agree. You know, when you are currently going through an emotional challenge, mental challenge, it is hard for a person to have that type of awareness, right? And so what helps is when you go to meet with a therapist, they are able to, and if it's not a therapist, it can also be like a psychologist. They are able to determine what type of care this person will benefit from or this adolescent will benefit from. They are able to determine really there's like a variety of different domains. Like, they assess for safety, they assess for they look into like family dynamics, they look into like social settings, they look into like the school, if there is a referral coming from the school, and they go through a variety of different like assessments is what we call them, in order to determine what type of care this person or this family will benefit from. And then based off of that, they will go ahead and provide that feedback to the family or the individual, and then that can also help them determine what type of therapist, what type of care they may be looking for if it's not from the person that's like doing that assessment.
Thinking about all those kids who had to go through the pandemic and had to be isolated to a certain extent and having class online, have you seen any repercussions from online schooling since becoming a therapist and working with adolescents?
I would say yes, in terms of like social anxiety and having more challenges with the exposure on the social media platforms that in my experience, you know, every therapist, every treatment center can have their own experience, subjective opinions. But in my experience and working with some treatment centers in my prior experience, I witnessed a lot of teenagers be exposed to like self-injurious behaviors, like self-harm, being exposed to this here is like a trigger warning, right? But just any sense of like pedophilia from like older adults that are on these platforms really trying to seduce like younger people. Groom. Like grooming is a huge thing that in my experience I've witnessed in the cases, and these cases requiring some support with that. And so like that's very heavy, for nowadays, like a teenager to have to deal with that. And not to say that that was in existence before, and because it was, right? But now it just seems like there's been an uprise in that, because there's so much more teenagers online now. Like there's so much more platforms now.
I was gonna say, do you think that's like a huge difference between, let's say, us growing up in our generation and this newer generation, because they grew up with technology? Like we could at some point say like, wow, like we turned out fine and we didn't really need all these mental health services, versus now I feel like it's almost a necessity, and more parents are taking their kids to therapy at a younger age just because, hey, I just want to make sure, and I want them to feel okay talking to somebody else.
The progression has happened. We've moved and progressed so much, and yet there's still so much more work to be done. But I'm just so proud of just right now how much resources are out there, how much conversations are happening surrounding mental health, surrounding tips, coping skills, surrounding tools for not just adolescents, but also for parents. Because as a parent, it can also be very difficult to know how to respond to your children when your children are going through these challenges. As a parent, it's very hard to, one, take care of your own mental health, and then also be mindful of your kids' mental health. And so with that, I'm just very proud of how much progress has been made with the access to care, access to resources, and how much talks there is on mental health. One
thing that now I want to go ahead and talk about is this entrepreneurial spirit that you've always had, because you've always wanted to do a clothing line. Ever since I met you, you've always been a hustler trying to see what you can sell. But you went into the therapy, mental health, and the service industry to a certain extent. But now you opened up your own private practice, Radiate Therapy, right? Radiate Hope Therapy, perdón. You're trying to check me.
I was about to check you right now.
Yeah, I was like, damn, the toe is going to come out. No, so Radiate Hope. Why Radiate Hope? And talk to us. Has it been an easy transition from typical 9 to 5 and now into being having your own private practice?
Yeah. Well, it's been a learning curve. Going from a full-time role working for a treatment center or group practice to just going independently, starting your own foundation is a very hard shift of, environment for your own self, both like when it comes to your finances, right? When it comes to your day-to-day, when it comes to where you're going to be receiving your clients from, like all those things. It's very like nerve-wracking just taking that step. So I took a leap of faith. I let go of my full-time job. I cut back to a part-time job with a group practice, and then I really prioritize opening up my private practice, which at some point I see myself going full-time in my private practice, and right now it's still the beginning stages. So it's just developing my foundation, focusing on my marketing, and networking and connecting with local providers. But yes, taking that step, it was very difficult, and also the reason why I took that step was because I'm very passionate and I am very purposeful, and at times that passion and that purpose didn't align. It didn't align for me in like my previous roles. And so right now I have the flexibility to fully focus on my purpose, which my purpose is for me to be of service to specifically those navigating mental health and substance abuse. And that's really much in alignment with like my own personal journey. and also I have a wealth of experience being able to provide support and services to that population. You know, that's where I got a lot of my experience from throughout my graduate program. As soon as I graduated from my graduate program and I entered the field as an associate and was receiving supervision, like it was in those types of settings. And so that adds to just my wealth of knowledge, and with my own personal experiences, I have more passion for what I do.
And I think it's important to have a sense of empathy, you know, for people talking about substance abuse, because one thing that I've always said, and this is not to bash on like Catholicism or anything of that, like, but if I have an issue with my partner, my girlfriend, my wife, and I go talk to a priest and they're trying to give me advice, it's sort of like, well, what experience do you have you know, living with somebody? It's a totally different dynamic. So if I want to choose a therapist, that's why they've always said, like, you know, shop for a therapist, because, you know, you want to find somebody who really understands you. I at the end of the day, I'm looking for like a Latino who understands my struggles as a first generation immigrant, you know, here in the United States, you know, living that duality. And if I'm going to you for substance abuse, I would like for you to be empathetic in that area. And anybody can listen. Any therapist is going to give me their evaluation on what I need. But I think having somebody who actually cares because they've been through and they understand that struggle it is so powerful and is so needed. So I thank you for what you're doing. Why the name Radiate Hope?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. With Radiate Hope, like that name, I really want to let people know that change is possible. I really want them to see that there is light when you may be in a dark place. And I really want people to feel that just by reading the name itself and like seeing that my practice is called Radiate Hope Therapy. And, you know, I do think that creates a path for them to start feeling hope even before they step into like a room with me or to even start their journey with me. And it's always an honor for me to just have someone be open for me to be a part of their journey. Like, it's always an honor. It's always like a very impactful moment for myself too as a therapist. And with Radiate Hope Therapy, like, I really do want to emote that feeling in the person on the other side, to let them know that it is possible to overcome these obstacles that are in your way right now, to really find a path forward, to really go against like what may be weighing you down. And so with Radiate Hope Therapy, like, I really do believe that name speaks to that experience.
Yeah, and then another name that I want to go ahead and dive into is the therapist homie. You know, I think that is such a beautiful juxtaposition. And look at my big words, you know, like therapist and homie, like so hood. Like, you can take the boy out of the hood, but you can never take the hood out of the boy, right? So
that's right.
Yeah, that's right. But what would you say to all those people who probably are like, nah, that's not for me? Like, therapy, you know, men especially, and then Latino men, where we're from in Southern California, Rialto, Fontana, San Bernardino, Los Angeles, who grew up very Latino, pride. We don't need to see a therapist, but then we have a therapist homie. You're like, oh, okay, changing the words. Yeah. Why?
Well, let's talk about it, bro. Right? Like, when people are like, that ain't for me, like, that's not for me. Like, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. And, you know, as your therapist homie, as your boy, I'm gonna just let you know that what you're doing is going against what it is that you actually want for yourself.
Are you gonna talk to me like a Gen Z? Like, hey, that's pretty sus. Like, because he's Gen Z. Yeah.
I'm not Gen Z. No? I'm a millennial, bro.
Yeah.
But I do have to get with the Gen Z times sometimes too, right? Like, I have to throw in my little periods in there every now and then. I have to throw in my, like, I'm dead, or like, bruh, like, whatever the case is, right? Just to, you know, to connect with the youth. But yeah, going back to like just being a homie, like, I also want to be that bridge. Like, I want to be that bridge, like, within the community. Like, I want to let my homies know. I want to let like my people know. And I want to let people that like resonate with my experience know that it is possible to seek out this type of support and not let that take away from the masculinity that it feels like you are holding on to. You know, it doesn't take away from being a man. It doesn't take away from the macho or the hardness or like whatever front we may put up when we're on the block, right? Like, and at times, like, we instantly switch into that, because when you're in the block and when you're growing up, like at least for me, like there was always times where people were a part of crews, people were a part of gangs, and you know, you walk down the street and people are already like throwing up their sets or like banging on you. Like that's what that for me, like they would come up to me like, where you from, homie? Like they're asking me what set I'm representing, right? And it's like, well, at that time I didn't represent anything. It's just like I don't I don't bang, like I don't do anything like that, right? Like although all my friends did, like they did, but since I was with them, like, you know, they affiliated me with them, and I mean, they're my boys at that time, right? Like, and some of them I still talk to this day, but still now just being able to be like this advocate for change and being that motto of like, well, you know, it is possible for me to talk about my emotions and be vulnerable, and also just talk about the things that I don't normally talk about with my family, you know, because brotherhood is very important. Like being around your friends is very important. And like when you're around the boys and when you have your homies, right, like you feel very comfortable there in those spaces. And, you know, those spaces can also be the opportunity to talk about like what you may be struggling with or what you're dealing with, and just let that be your support system.
One of the things that I also want to mention is you do family therapy. So obviously family therapy can mean so many things, but in the aspect of substance abuse, because obviously you're treating the person who's going through it, but the people around that person are also going through. So how would that dynamic look in terms of family therapy? Because so many Latinos are like, okay, yes, here's my son, but sometimes treating the son, daughter, person, the family also has to alleviate and heal from that too, and you can support with that as well.
Yes, I can. And with that, it's very important for me as a therapist to set that foundation from the very beginning when I am working with my clients, and to set up I don't want to say, I guess I can say expectation, that when we are in therapy, it's not just focused on the patient or the client. It's also dependent on those around the patient and the client. And so every single time I always, you know, describe the dynamics, the way they work, right? Like you can have the patient be here, and then you have like the parents be here, and if the patient's like progressing and, you know, moving forward and moving along, and then the parent is remaining the same way, like there's just going to be this inconsistency, and there's not going to be an alignment. And what happens is that, you know, they're going to continue to progress, and they may just end up back here because the parent is still there,
holding them back.
Exactly.
And that's interesting, because so many people would think like, pero yo para qué necesito la terapia si el que la necesita eres tú? You know, yo no estoy haciendo esas cosas and whatnot. But that is so valid if the client or patient is progressing, but the family is being reluctant to even therapy and openness, then that could really hinder the progress that person has made already.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, that's very important to just educate a lot in the beginning stage of when, you know, for me as a therapist, when I'm starting treatment with a family, it's always important for me to just educate and like introduce them, and of course like really let them know like what the process may look like. And the process can look different per family, for every individual. It's not a one size fits all. However, there is like evidence-based practices that I implement that really support with the treatment journey itself. But yes, it looks different, and it also looks different per therapist. Like, you know, this is just my experience as a licensed professional clinical counselor. This is my experience, and you know, there's other therapists and other practitioners that have their unique experiences with their own unique certifications in their own areas of expertise. Like they have their own specialties. And so it's very important to also take note of that when someone is looking for a therapist. Like, is this person really equipped to support me with what I'm looking for? Like, I don't imagine it bring in a client that's dealing with like a eating disorder or even with ADHD when that's not my specialty area. that, would be a disservice to the person. So it's very important for just families and individuals to be cautious of that.
What would you tell, and before we wrap things up, to two different people, to the Latino parents whose kids are probably struggling with mental health, and to your homies out there, who need the therapy? What would you tell both of them? And I'd like to start first with the parents, the Latino parents who probably are reluctant to therapy, probably see their kid need help but don't know where to start and how to get the service.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them?
Se vale llorar. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I would, to the parents, I would tell them that it's okay to learn. Mm-hmm. Se vale aprender.
Sí sabe hablar español, by the way, nomás que le da un poquito de pena.
Sí me da un poco de pena, pero no todas las veces.
Sí. Ya apagando la cámara es un cotorro.
Pero se vale aprender diferentes formas de hacer. Mm-hmm. Porque si hay mucha información, there's a lot of resources out there mm-hmm. que te puede enseñar a different approach. Mm-hmm. That can be very helpful. It can be powerful. The future can look different from your past, and mm-hmm. it's possible. So that's one thing that I would really want to express now. To the homies, definitely, it's okay to change and to break those patterns. You don't have to be stuck in your ways. Mm-hmm. There's a different way of doing things, a different way of showing up, a different way of you showing up for your other homies and for the families. And, I also want to say that I went blank.
It's fine. It tends to happen. There's a lot of lights.
Yeah. No, I went blank. But yeah, to the families, I also want to say that, your past doesn't have to define your future. Yeah. And, there can be a lot of patterns that can be broken. And
I think that's important that you said right now, your past doesn't have to define your future, or an instance doesn't have to define your future. I think it defines who you are, but it doesn't it makes who you are, but it doesn't define who you are. Mm-hmm. A lot of us have evolved and grown from certain instances in our past with our family members, with our friends, that probably if we think about them too much, we're going to be stuck there, and we're going to think mm-hmm. about them and how they affect us. But that affected us back then. That doesn't mean it should affect us now. We can live with it, or mm-hmm. we can move with it. Yeah. It's like that saying in Spanish, cargamos con nuestra cruz. We carry our own cross, but we carry it and we keep going. Mm-hmm. So that's... I'm not a therapist or anything, but I'd mm-hmm. like to say, in my past lives I was.
Or you're still a great motivational speaker. Yeah. So,
But no, thank you so much for, stopping by Échale Podcast to talk about your private practice. Please let the people know where they can find you, and any last words, your Instagram handle, and definitely if you need help finding therapy, or if you want a consultation with the therapist homie, please let us know where we can go get that. I can't, unfortunately, because I'm a friend, so that doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Jose. I really do appreciate you having me on. I think what you're doing is very powerful, having these conversations and sparking these types of conversations with different people in different professions. That's awesome. Thank you for having me. Thank you for those that are listening. But yeah, you can go ahead and find me on Instagram at therapist homie. That's my personal. My private practice is at Radiate Hope Therapy. You can also look me up on my website at radiatehopetherapy.com. I do offer a 15-minute free consultation. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I always...
English or Spanish?
English or Spanish. I'm a bilingual therapist. I provide services in both. I am more than happy to connect with you to see how we can support you. And my email, egarcia@radiatehopetherapy.com. My number, I You can find that on my website, but I won't name drop it here. Yeah. But yeah, you can also find all the details under Jose Quintero's podcast details.
Yeah, so I'm going to put the description below so you guys can go ahead and follow him. That was Radiate Hope Therapy. That was also therapist.homie.
Yeah.
So make sure to go ahead and follow him on Instagram. 15 minutes. 15 minutes is all you need to just talk to somebody. Entonces, si tú necesitas que alguien te escuche algo que está pasando en tu vida y necesitas un guía y no sabes hacia dónde ir, pues acá el terapeuta Emmanuel Garcia, también conocido como Therapist Homie, te puede ayudar. Esa consulta de 15 minutos puede cambiar tu vida. Hasta la próxima y gracias por estar aquí otra vez en Échale Podcast.